we're starting all over again, and we are recording the class as usual. Before Mariam goes ahead with whatever concerns she may have, I would like to introduce the new book. And I said that the new book is titled Tradition and Dissent. And I said tradition is something that we're familiar with. But we're not very familiar with the idea of dissenting and dissent. Over the course of this second book, we'll be talking about both traditions and dissent and see we're going to make those comparisons between traditionalists and dissenting individuals. I started explaining the word dissent or the word dissenting by setting it against the word traditions, because we're familiar with traditions. Traditions can be moral traditions that we follow and abide by in our life. Traditions can be, habits and customs that people go by. They somehow regulate the life of people. There is common agreement on following those sets of tradition. What happens if you don't follow those sets of traditions? If you don't follow the traditions, you'll be referred to as a dissenting individual or a non-conformist. So conformity would be to follow the rules and guidelines, the traditional and the societal guidelines. If you don't follow that, please mute your mic. Mute your mic. If you don't follow, like I said, the traditions, you are looked down in most of the cases, and it can get even worse. You can be tried, you can be put on trial, and you can lose, in some rare cases, you may lose your life because you're challenging the mainstream. You're challenging the status quo, and the status quo is based on guidelines inspired by and based on traditions. Again, traditions can be moral traditions, can be religious traditions, any set of rules and any set of habits and customs that people have been following for years and years, for generations and generations. So for you as an individual to come and say, no, I'm not going to follow this or that item of tradition, that would be a problem, because in this case you are challenging the conventional wisdom. Those traditions are normally based on experiences by people that we respect, whether they are religious individuals in the past, or whether they are moral philosophers in the past, and whether they are our elders, our forefathers, and our and grandparents and their grandparents. So people assume that because these guidelines are rooted in the past, this is a guarantee that they are correct and they are fault proof. So for you to come and say no, I don't accept this, and I accept that. Who are you? I mean, this is society talking or speaking. Who are you to say that this or that item of traditions is not correct or is not proper or is not even practical? So this is what the whole argument is about. The whole book argument is about just that, whether individuals are in a position to challenge some of the traditional beliefs, especially when we talk about moral traditional beliefs, as we're going to see. Okay, so this is what the whole argument in the book is about. And in order to kind of present it, we're going to have a number of issues that a number of people and philosophers are going to talk about and debate. One such thing would be the idea of courage, and other moral virtues. And as we proceed, we'll talk about every and each one of them. Again, at the core of this idea of traditions and dissent, there is also this idea of whether we're following traditions blindly, or we should, of whether we should use our minds and challenge and question those sets of traditions. In order to do that, we're going to have a number of philosophers. One of them happens to be the high and mighty Greek philosopher Plato. We'll talk about Plato in a minute. And we're going to also talk about his mentor, his teacher, Socrates. We'll talk about the difference between the two, and what kind of philosophy each and every one of them stands for. Okay, so this is what the whole argument is going to be about. We're starting with Plato, and of course Plato is a philosopher, and we'll have in the process have to define what philosophy is, and then we move to the philosophical arguments that Plato is going to set for us, and we are on our way discovering an of knowledge we're not too familiar with. We're familiar by now. We're familiar with the arts. We have done paintings. We're familiar with history because we have done Cleopatra. We're familiar with literature because we did Christopher Marlowe. This time around, we're moving to a totally different domain, and this domain is philosophy. And philosophy is nice and everything, but it would need some kind of thinking. So it's not something that you would memorize and that would be it. No, there is more to philosophy than just that. You'll have to rationalize things. You have to think twice about things. Philosophy is about rationalism. And rationalism is using your own mind. Rationalism is about challenging concepts and ideas, and rationalism is about deconstructing things. You don't take things for granted. You need to be all the time questioning things. And of course, questioning things all the time, and if you're questioning sets of traditions and orthodoxies that can lead you to areas that you wouldn't love to go to. I mean, it can be as bad as being stigmatized by the entire society as a dissenter and non-conformist. We have seen that with Cézanne. If you still remember, Cézanne was a non-conformist. Remember when we spoke about him as a representative of modernist artists, because he would challenge accepted, art forms. He would say, no, I wouldn't have to go all the way to classical models, and I don't have to mimic and copy and imitate them. The present has enough stuff that can inspire any painter and any artist. The same applies if you still remember, Christopher Marlowe and Dr. Faustus. Remember, Dr. Faustus was a nonconformist. He was a dissenter. So dissenting from what? Dissenting from existing orthodoxies. Okay, what are some of the existing orthodoxies that we had in the Elizabethan age during the time when Christopher Marlowe was operating? It was all about, knowing your limits, the fact that you're a human being, you're limited, and you shouldn't be going beyond your limits. You shouldn't be assuming rules that are not given by. So Cézanne was at the center in his own artistic way. Christopher Marlowe was also at the center. His creation, Dr. Faustus, was also at the center because they would challenge traditional beliefs, right? Whether those traditional beliefs are artistic, religious, or moral. Again, and the second book, Traditions and Dissent, is also about that. And we're doing that from a philosophical perspective. It's not literature that we're dealing with. It's not paintings and art that we're dealing with. It's not history that we're dealing with. We're doing with philosophy. And like I said, philosophy does not lend itself to easy interpretation. It needs focus. It needs rationalism. You have to be rational. Rational means that you have to use your mind. Using means that you have to question things. You shouldn't be taking stuff for granted. Okay, so what is it that we're going to do? Let's go to the book and see how we're going to handle that. Can you still hear me?
Yes, Doctor, I have a question.
Yes. Okay.
We thought that we will take today the Diva.
Yes,
from the previous book.
Yeah, I thought so too, but somehow we have an update on the calendar and the Diva is dropped out. So we're not doing the Diva. We're
so the Diva, it's not included in our quiz or final exam.
No, it won't. Okay. So Cézanne marks the end of book one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So can you see that? So this is the second book. Can you see that?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay,
yes, we
good.
can. Yes.
Okay, so it's Plato on tradition and belief. Okay, so the chapter that we're handling or dealing with is Plato on tradition and belief. Okay, and the whole book, like I said, is or has the title Tradition and Dissent. And like I said, they are antonyms or opposites. Okay, so dissent is when you challenge tradition when you ask questions, when you say, why is this, why that, why do I have to accept this, I have to think about this before I accept it. So tradition is about following a set of guidelines that have been handed down to you, one generation to another. You follow those sets of tradition without asking questions. So if you start asking questions, if you start challenging those sets of tradition, you are dissenting, and you are at the center, and that would be um, difficult sometimes because you are challenging, something that lots of people believe in. So you're challenging their sensibilities, you're undermining those sensibilities, and this is obviously a problem. Again, the first book has the theme reputations, and it used to focus on individuals. While the second book, Tradition and Dissent, uh, um, addresses traditions, and those traditions are shared by a group of people. So if the first book, Reputations, is on and about individuals, the second book, which is called Tradition and Dissent, is about groups of people, because we talk about people and their traditions. Okay, so Plato on tradition and belief. So starting with Plato, and in a minute I'll tell you who Plato is and what he stands for. So obviously we'll talk about tradition using material from and by Plato. So what are the items that we're going to address ourselves? We're going to start, we have already started talking about Plato. So there is going to be a brief introduction, and then what is a traditional belief, Plato and Socrates in Athens. So like I said, Socrates is the mentor or the teacher of Plato. So we'll talk about Socrates and Plato, and we're going to talk about where they used to live and operate, which is Athens, and Athens happens to be the capital of ancient Greece. It was a nation state, if you like. We'll talk about that. It's a city that has all the features of a nation or a country, and it was so advanced in science, in the arts, and also in literature, as we're going to see. And then we'll talk about Plato and his Socrates, and we're going to see whether Socrates is the actual, the historical Socrates that we know about, or is he, a fictional character invented by Plato. We'll talk more about Socrates, the historical Socrates, the philosopher, and his method of method of thinking and research. He has his own philosophical method, which depends on the idea of asking questions and then asking further questions and so on and so forth. And then we'll have material from Plato. It's more or less like an essay or a philosophical tract called Lachos or Lacus. And this is, by the way, Greek, and I don't speak Greek. I don't know whether it's we should say Lachus, which is English, or Lachos, or Lacus, which is obviously Greek. So Lacus and Greek tradition, and then There is going to be this talk about courage and whether courage means endurance according to Socrates and his arguments or not. So is courage endurance? We're going to talk about that using arguments, and the arguments that we're using are for the most part deductive. We'll talk about deductive and inductive reasoning. We'll talk about the idea of validity, whether a philosophical assumption is valid or not, valid from the logical point of view. We'll talk about that. We'll have an example in order to illustrate whether courage is endurance. And it's the case of the foolish firefighter. Another definition of courage will be given by another character who happens to be called Nicias. And Nicias is going to define courage, and we're going to set the definition of courage according to Nicias against the definition of courage according to Lachus. Another question will pop up, and it's about courage as the whole of virtue. We'll see whether it is the whole of virtue or there is more to courage than just that. We'll talk about the puzzle of the Lachus. The Lachus, I mean the article or the essay itself. Talk about knowledge, opinion, and the status of Daedalus. Then why Socrates does not know the answers. And we'll talk about, again, Socrates and his style, the fact that he does not present answers. He only asks questions. When you give him answers, he asks you other questions and so on. We'll see why he is doing that. We'll talk about Plato and why he rejects tradition. And if Plato is a rejecter of tradition, it means that he is a dissenter. We're going to see how he is reflecting that in his work. Again, the Socratic method in teaching and learning, and that would be the end of the whole argument and the whole chapter. Okay. Yeah, if you have a question, go ahead. It's okay. No questions, huh? Okay, so what are the ultimate aims? What is it that we're trying to teach you? We're trying to introduce you to some skills involved in studying philosophy. And those skills have to do with reading a philosophical text, recognizing a philosophical question, and analyzing and evaluating a deductive argument. Another aim would be to explore some of Plato's philosophical views, especially his views about the value of traditional beliefs, whether those traditional beliefs are valuable or not. Again, he's going to present that through philosophy. Again, so in this chapter, we are going to take or study some extracts from Lacus, which is a dialogue written by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. Again, one of our aims in reading these extracts is to discover how Plato used philosophical argument to question traditional beliefs. So, right from the very start, Plato is a challenger of philosophical beliefs. Okay, why would Plato be a challenger of traditional beliefs? simply because he is using his mind. He is a rationalist. He is a rationalist philosopher, and rationalist philosophers use their minds more often than not. They don't settle for easy answers. They challenge traditional concepts and ideas, and sometimes they get convinced, and most of the time they don't get convinced. Okay, so as you can see right from the very start, we're saying that Plato is a dissenter, is a non-conformist because he doesn't take what tradition gives him for granted. No, he asks questions, he challenges ideas and beliefs. Okay. Again, perhaps before we start, I would like to give you some background about philosophy. So philosophy, like I said, is a branch of knowledge where the focus is normally on using your mind. So, what are the existing branches of knowledge that we normally have? We have the arts, we have literature, we have history, and we also have philosophy. And philosophy is again when you take advantage of the fact that you have a thinking mind. So you start to rationalize stuff. You start to ask questions, and then if you don't get convinced, if your mind does not get convinced with the answers, you keep asking questions. It's about this sense of inquiry that people are endowed with as human beings. So, as a human being, one distinguishing factor, one distinguishing feature or attribute that would distinguish you from other creatures would be the fact that you have a thinking mind and you can think. You are a rational, human beings are rational creatures. Rational means that they can think, they can ask questions. Okay, so philosophy is based on rationalism. For the most part, when philosophy started, it was all about this free exercise of minds, the fact that people are, exercising the rational and intellectual powers. That's why you have mathematical questions and mathematical inquiries and all these kinds of things. So it's reason. It's this power of reason. It's this power of the intellect that philosophy is based on. Okay, so philosophy is normally divided into two sections. Whenever people undertake as a way of making sense of the world around them, they normally engage in two main pursuits. Either what we call ontology or epistemology. I know these terms may be heavy-handed, but we'll explain them. We'll use them more often than not, and eventually you will get a good grasp and a good handle on them. Again, philosophy is either about ontology or epistemology. Ontology means that philosophers are interested in knowing how the world came into being, what the world is made up of, who created the world and how. This is what ontology is about. Epistemology, on the other hand, is about is sometimes even called the theory of knowledge. Epistemology in philosophy is about exploring how we get to know knowledge, how we know what we know. So how we know, is it all our mind? Is it all rational? You need to think of things in order to perhaps know about them, or is it perception? Do we know about things through our different senses? So this is what epistemology is about. Epistemology is about our sources of knowledge, how we know what we know. Do we know what we know through our different senses, the sense of touch, the sense of hearing, the sense of sight, okay, the sense of smell, the sense of, is it about senses or is it about our mind? And we're going to have this polarity and this kind of um, competition between the mind and the different senses. Some philosophers are going to be all for the different senses, and some other people are going to be all for our minds. So where does Plato fit? Plato is a rationalist philosopher, which means that he believes that we know about the world through our mind and through our intellect. While another philosopher like Aristotle, for example, is called an empirical philosopher. Empirical means that you depend on your sense experience. You get to know about the world and you know the world through your different senses. Okay? So we have two philosophers in the chapter. We have Socrates and we have his student Plato. Are they empirical philosophers who believe in sense experience, or are they rational philosophers? They are rational philosophers who believe that we need to think of things in terms of reason, in terms of the mind. Everything has to go through our mind, and our mind determines whether it is acceptable or not. Plato and Socrates, who are intellectual and rationalist philosophers, are going to question everything, including traditions, and this is going to put them perhaps in trouble. They will have to suffer, especially Socrates, because of the fact that they said, listen, we'll have to challenge and question tradition and see whether the ideas spawning out of tradition are acceptable or not. Whatever our minds accept, we'll agree with and we'll follow. Whatever our mind does not accept, we will not agree with, and hence the idea of rejecting it. Okay, this is what the whole argument is about. Again, this time around, we're not appreciating something through our senses, like we have done with the arts. We're not reading something historical and we're trying to see whether it is true or not. We're not, appreciating literature through reading. No, this time around we're doing philosophy, and philosophy, at least for our present purposes, is purely, rational and intellectual. So, in order to be able to perhaps accept and follow certain sets of traditions, you have to challenge those sets. If they are consistent with your mind, if your mind accepts them, you accept them. And this is actually where the problem is, because lots of the tradition or the sets of traditions that we get are inherited and are followed blindly. We never stop and ask why we're doing what we're doing. Again, philosophy in this case would be a wake up call, where philosophers are going to start to ask questions and challenge traditional orthodoxies, especially if they are moral traditional orthodoxies. Again, traditional beliefs would be look at some of the ideas for when they tell you, for example, if you have a headache, you take this or that remedy, for example. You never ask them why. You never ask them, yeah, perhaps tell me what, I mean, the chemical elements that this kind of remedy has. You never ask that. You don't break the remedy down to its basic components in order to get to know whether it is effective or not. You take people's word for it. Okay, and why would you take other people's word for it? Because this is what you were born and raised to believe in. You believe that every time you have a headache, you go and get this kind of medicines without any questions, without and no questions asked. This is called tradition. So what happens if you okay? So you have a headache, and you're perhaps asking for something, and somebody would recommend this or that kind of medication. And when you start to ask questions about how effective it is, what it is made of, people are going to start to ask you or to wonder at you, saying, and that it falsified, right? Don't we hear that sometimes?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
انت هتتفلسف means that people are not ready to answer all your questions, and then it means that you're starting to ask questions that have to do with the mind. Your questions are normally the byproduct of the mind. And because people are not used to other people asking questions, they would feel perhaps bored. They would feel that you are perhaps bossing them around, patronizing, or any other um, thing for that matter. Um, Again, so when somebody recommends a medicine, you go straight and perhaps buy it or do it at home, and you drink it or you take it somehow. You never question, you never ask questions. Because why? Because I mean, he or she is going to tell you that my father or my mother used to recommend it, and she inherited this recommendation from a father or a mother, and then you have a series of or you have a chain of generations that have been practicing this, and nobody is asking questions. For you to come and ask, that would be a problem, obviously. um, and the writer is giving us an example. He's talking about netted stings. I mean, there is obviously a plant that is, if you perhaps touch it, you get stung, you get hurt. So he's asking. He was obviously asking what is it that he should do in order to perhaps heal, and they normally recommend dock leaves. So he takes it. Every time he gets stung, he just go and buy or pick the leaves up, and that would be it. He never asks why this particular kind of remedy or medicine. Again, why does he take it for granted that dock leaves are a good remedy for nettle stings? Because this is what he was born and raised to believe in. This is what he heard from his family and from his friends and all these kinds. And then this has been handed down from one generation to another. Again, he doesn't reflect on what they say. He doesn't check. He himself does not check whether what they are saying about this kind of remedy is correct or valid. So this is simply traditional belief. So again, traditional belief or a belief is something that has been passed down from one generation to another without you examining it for yourself. Again, many of our beliefs are traditional, and they can be ethical beliefs or moral beliefs. And those beliefs normally regulate our lives, and we use them in order to kind of treat each other. Some of those beliefs are as simple as it's wrong to tell a lie. This is a belief. Okay, it's wrong to be sexually promiscuous. Promiscuous means that to be sexually forward. There is nothing wrong with eating meat. So these are beliefs that we were born and raised to follow. Have we ever stopped and asked why we're following them? No, we never ask, because it seems that we are all agreed on them, and we see that they are valid, then they regulate our life. So again, you accept these beliefs on trust. You never question them, and this is how you follow moral beliefs. Again, do yourself check whether those beliefs are correct or wrong, whether they are valid or not, whether they are really doable and workable or acceptable. No, you don't, because once you start doing that, people are going to look at you with they will give you strange looks. Again, questioning them would be through perhaps, if we're talking about a remedy, you try it on yourself and see how valid and how effective it is. Again, if it comes to moral beliefs, you also have to kind of investigate. And using your mind, you have to put the beliefs together and see whether they fit together and they're consistent or not. Again, how would you do that? You are doing that with the assistance of your mind. Again, if you start examining traditional beliefs, especially if they are moral, you'll be hit with the idea that this is time consuming and difficult. Why? Because you'll be always met with the idea that these are traditional moral beliefs and they are shared by members of the community. And if the members of the community are never wrong, if they agree on something, and if they go about their life following those things that they believe in, so it's not expected from you as an individual to come and say, listen, we have to perhaps reconsider those beliefs. Why? Because if you're doing that, you are disrupting and undermining the harmony of society, and you're going to create confusion and conflict, and this is something that people hate. People want to live in harmony, people want to live in peace, and they don't want people to challenge their orthodoxies and their traditional beliefs. So again, on one account or on one count, you whatever you are trying to question wouldn't be accepted, because the majority of population in any given society are following what you are challenging, and it proves correct, at least for them. So for you to come and say we have to perhaps reconsider or make a fresh assessment or something, they would say, listen, you are disrupting the harmony of society. You're disrupting the stability and the peaceful atmosphere that we live in. You're confusing us. Again, on another count, traditional beliefs have a long history, and people take them to be reflecting the experience and wisdom of many past generations. So again, for you as an individual to come and to say that perhaps those beliefs should be reconsidered and should be thought further about, they say, who are you? These are tried and tested traditional beliefs, and personal experience or reflection, personal reflection, wouldn't bring us anything new. It's going to be a sheer waste of time, because those are hard and tried and tested beliefs. Again, when you look at the reasons why people wouldn't accept your new ideas or the questions that you are asking about certain traditional beliefs, remember we spoke about the first argument, and we said that lots of people are sharing those beliefs. So if you come and say this, listen, let's reconsider those beliefs, they're going to say that you are actually not a promoter of social harmony. You are acting against the social harmony that everyone is trying to cement. And they don't look at whether the beliefs that they hold and embrace are true or not. This is beside the question for them. The second argument for not embracing what you're saying as a dissenter or as a challenger of beliefs would be the idea that those beliefs were tested over many generations. And again, your personal experience wouldn't be enough, because you're only an individual. Again, so when we talk about tradition and we say that tradition is the best source of moral belief, when you look at tradition from this perspective, we are referring to what they call moral traditionalism. So these are moral beliefs, and you believe that they are traditional and you should follow them. So we'll always have this kind of conflict between moral traditionalism and moral rationalism. So traditionalism here would be inheriting beliefs and believing in them without asking questions, without using your mind. So this is traditionalism, while rationalism is about asking questions, is about challenging orthodoxies, traditional orthodoxies. Again, if you're talking about philosophers, philosophers are for the most part rationalists. So they wouldn't be in favor of moral traditionalism, because moral traditionalism is about following tradition blindly without asking questions. So most of the philosophers are not moral traditionalists. They are rather moral rationalists. And moral rationalists, from the word or the phrase moral rationalism. And we said that rationalism is about using your mind, is about asking relevant questions. So moral rationalists argue that we ought to question existing moral beliefs and keep only the beliefs that can be rationally defended and explained. So it is reason, it is the mind for them, the mind, not tradition, that is the proper basis for our moral beliefs. So if we have moral beliefs, those moral beliefs should be based on the mind, on reason, rather than on tradition. So where does Plato stand when it comes to moral beliefs? Plato was a moral rationalist. Moral rationalist in the sense that he's going to use rational argument to question and challenge traditional beliefs. It's all about investigating stuff using your power and the power of the intellect or the mind, rather than tradition. Am I making sense so far?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Mr.
Do you guys have any questions so far?
I have something to say, but I don't think it's a question, more like sharing a thought.
What's your name? Do you have a name?
Yeah, Pascal.
Pascal, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Like for example, before like many generations before, traditions I think like change because they used to get married, for example, at a young age. But
Ah,
now things changed, and it's not the case anymore. So
yes.
traditions change by time.
Not all of them. Some tradition are hard, or some sets of tradition are hard and fast. I mean, they are rigid. You cannot change them. And some of them change over time because people, are now perhaps more educated. And if I say they are more educated, it means that they are using what? They are using their minds, right?
Yeah, true.
And again, you wouldn't reject tradition in its entirety. You don't say no, no. I'm going to reject all forms of tradition. No, that does, and this is not even correct. So you only change or reject those traditions that are not consistent with what's happening in real life. Those reactionary means that they pull you back, they get you back. So you're trying
Yes.
to advance, you're trying to improve your life and the lives of others, and you see uh, stuff that you're not very convinced of or with, and it is a stumbling block. It is kind of standing in the way, and you cannot achieve because of its presence. Again, like Pascal is saying, there are, sets of traditions get changed over time. People reconsider them, and the question is how people reconsider them. It's about putting our minds to them. We start to ask right questions about them. Again, it's not about refusing and rejecting the whole sets of tradition and say, no, we're not following tradition anymore. It's about only refusing and rejecting those tradition or sets of tradition that would stand in the way of progress, in the way of achievement and everything. Okay, any more questions? Hello?
No, doctor, thank you.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, no questions. Okay,
No question is clear.
okay.
Thank you, then.
So again, before I proceed, I would like to make sure that you guys have you now have a good handle on some of the concepts. Remember, this is something that we shared at one point when we spoke about the two. We have two calendars, actually three, if we talk about certain religions. We have two calendars. We have a calendar. We have the pre-Christian calendar, or pre-Christ. Pre means before, and this is called BCE. So BCE is this calendar that would mark periods before the advent and before the birth of Christ. And you have CE, and CE is called Common Era. And Common Era is a calendar, is also a marker that would indicate that we're talking about periods since the birth and perhaps the death of Jesus Christ. Okay, so when I say that Plato and Socrates used to live perhaps in the 15th in the 5th century BCE. BCE means before the time of Christ. So it means BCE means before Common Era, or before our Common Era. So this is before actually history started. This is before the calendar that we're using now, where this is 20, right? And this is 2020, and 2020 is Common Era, right? Before that, before those 2020 years, we had BCE, which means before Common Era. Is that clear? So whether we're talking about Plato or Socrates, we talk about people who used to live towards the end of the 5th century before Common Era. Okay, so where did Plato used to live? He used to live, of course, in the city state of Athens. Athens is, of course, the capital Greek, and it was actually a nation or a city state in and of itself, where you have government, you even have a democracy where people elect officials that represent them. Unfortunately, they were democratic. I wouldn't say fully democratic. They were half democratic because they wouldn't allow women, the slaves, and foreign citizens to vote and to choose their leaders. Again, their democracy was inspirational. It was all about having debates where male citizens would gather, and they would discuss issues, and they would vote and come up with decisions and decrees and resolutions. Again, when we talk about Athens at the time, it was a cultural and intellectual hub or center. and it used to attract scholars and teachers from across the Greek and even the Mediterranean world. I mean, where you normally have people coming from Iraq, people coming from ancient Egypt, and the Greeks themselves used to travel to south to Egypt in order to get learning and all these kinds of things. So again, what we're trying to stress here is the fact that Plato and Socrates used to live in a climate of ideas where there was this free exchange of ideas, where there was democracy, and people would come up with initiatives and would use their minds and would engage in artistic and literary pursuits. During the time, we have great architectures, we had great arts, we had great paintings and sculptures, we had great tragedies. Remember when we spoke about Marlowe and we said that Christopher Marlowe was writing tragedies according to Shakespearean and also Greek models, and we said that Dr. Faustus, for example, has some borrowings from Greek tragedy, the idea of the prologue and the idea of the epilogue. Remember when we spoke about the concept of the tragic hero who is almost perfect in everything except for the fact that he has a flaw, and this flaw brings about his downfall at the end. This is all Greek influence. So again, Plato was the son of this period. He was the byproduct of this period. So it's only natural that we have people like Plato who use their minds, who have established those domains of philosophy that would focus on rationalism. So this is Plato, and along with Plato we will have Socrates, and we'll have to make a distinction between the historical Socrates that history books talk about, and the fictional Socrates that we have in the works of Plato. So Socrates was the mentor of Plato. Mentor is a teacher. So if you have a teacher that you look up to and he or she teaches you this and that, he makes sure that you understand this and that, we call him or her a mentor. So Socrates was Plato's mentor, and Plato was his student and his pupil. So what is it that Plato learned from Socrates? He learned from him how to be philosophical and how to be a philosopher in the rational sense of the word, where you wouldn't settle for easy answers, where you would ask all types of questions. Again, Socrates, of course, was older. Socrates was not rich. Plato was. Plato came from an aristocratic family, and he was rich in everything. Socrates, on the other hand, was of humble origins, and his father was a mason or a stonemason or a sculptor, and his mother was a midwife. So what did Socrates do in order to earn his living? He would dedicate his life to philosophical discussion. He he was not known to have a specific trade. He would go around in markets and he would stop people and start to engage in philosophical discussions with them. So he has this unique style where he does not present himself as a teacher or an expert. He only asks questions and he would engage people into discussions. And his hopes would be to discover the truth. Again, he was admired by so many wealthy and influential individuals like Plato himself. Again, if we talk about Plato and we talk about Socrates, we have to also talk about, we spoke about Athens, and this is where they lived and operated. And there was also another city or city-state by the name of Sparta. And Sparta was a rival city-state. Rival to whom or to what? It was a rival to Athens, and they used to have this political rivalry, and they would go to a lot of wars. And the final war that they had together had Sparta beating and defeating Athens and taking it over means occupying it and installing a puppet government. A puppet government would be a government that would work for a government that would secure and advance the interests of the occupying country. So this was the case. Sparta was ruling Athens for some time, when Plato and when Socrates was there. This was short-lived. After a number of years, democracy would be restored. To be specific, it was 4 years later. After Athens and their leader and its leaders are now governing, they started to put Socrates on trial, and they would accuse him of impiety and of corrupting the youth or the young. What is it that Socrates was doing according to them? They said one reason why we got defeated by the Spartans was because of the ideas of Socrates. The fact that Socrates' activities encouraged people to question traditional religious and moral values, and this would contribute to the downfall of the city. So they would put him on trial for those reasons and those accusations, and they would sentence him to die by drinking hemlock, which he did very peacefully. Mute the mic, please. So what is interesting about Socrates is the fact that he never wrote anything. He left us nothing that we can, read. It was all, things. It was all talks that were recorded in the works of others. Plato, for example, reproduced some of the ideas of Socrates in his philosophical works. So it was only ideas that he was kind of discussing and kind of introducing in his work. Perhaps to pay tribute and to give credit to his mentor, Socrates, Plato would have dialogues where one of the parties, one of the individuals involved in this dialogue would be Socrates. Again, this is not the real Socrates. He may be representing his ideas, but he's not the historical Socrates. He was perhaps, a fictional character. Again, if anything, it would show you that Socrates was having such a hold on Plato. His influence and his impact on Plato was so great. We're talking about Plato, and we will have to also mention the fact that Plato founded or created an academy. It's called the Academy. Actually, all the academies that we have now are named after the original academy created and founded by Plato. It was a meeting place for scholars and students who are interested in philosophy, mathematics, and astronomy. Again, it was a powerhouse for ideas. People would go and study and research and do research and all these kinds of things. Even after, its influence would go even beyond Plato and after he dies. Okay, so let's talk about, okay, so we spoke about historical Socrates, and we said that he lived in Athens, and the fact that he was the son of a stonemason, and the fact that he didn't have one specific job, and he used to go to the market and stop people and engage in philosophical conversations with them. This is the historical Socrates, the poor Socrates. The Socrates that we have in Plato and in his work is the invention of Plato. Again, this was meant to perhaps pay tribute to and give credit to Socrates, the mentor of Plato. Again, what would be the strategy in Plato's work? In Plato's philosophical works, you normally have dialogues between a number of people, and the dialogue would take, the title of the dialogue would take the name of one of the characters involved. In one of those dialogues, we have Lacus or Lachus or Lacus or Laches, happens to be one of the characters in this kind of philosophical essay. Again, if we talk about those Platonic dialogues, we will find that they don't actually record actual conversations that took place while Socrates was still alive. They are literary works, not historical accounts. And by the way, Plato is known for his gift with words, if you like. He was really gifted. He was very poetic when it comes to the prose that he used to produce. It is prose, but it is very poetic. So again, it's very important that we distinguish between the real historical Socrates and the character that appears in Plato's dialogues. So while the historical Socrates was clearly an important influence on Plato, there is no reason to assume that Plato wrote his dialogues simply as a showcase for Socratic philosophy. He was not a replica of Socrates in other words. Plato has or had his own reasons for choosing certain topics and for following certain lines of arguments. Am I making sense so far? So this is whom? This is Socrates. What do you make of this piece of sculpture? What do you think? Can we look at him? Perhaps saying that he was ugly or good looking is not proper, right? Hello.
Yes.
Yes, right.
But he's not, it wouldn't, um,
His
I,
face isn't so clear.
yeah, but he wasn't tall, right? If you look, if you talk about Athens at the time, and if you talk
He
about
looks
the,
short.
yeah, he looks short, and short, typically, if you're short, it would be better if you're tall, right?
And fat.
Yeah, if you're fat, it would be better if you're thin, right? So this is
No.
what this is what people traditionally say about Socrates, that he was ugly. Okay, of course, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and ugliness is relative. And it's not about the beauty of the body or the face as much as it is about the beauty of the heart and the beauty of the soul, right? um, but perhaps we're not referring to his physical features. We're not judging him on whether he was handsome or not. We're judging him based on how he dresses. And how he dresses would tell you that he wasn't very, yeah, he wasn't, he wasn't interested in dress. He wasn't, he was after the truth. He was, there was a film about him where you have him, or his wife fighting with him all the time over the budget. The fact that he once, uh, um, it's daylight, he goes out to the markets, and instead of working for somebody in order to earn his living, he would talk to them. He would engage in conversations about moral values and moral virtues. He was a practical, in other words. He was an intellectual individual at a time when life obviously was not that easy. Okay, so this is Socrates. Okay, so there is this idea that Socrates is primarily interested in moral questions. And the fact that he is concerned with the qualities of virtues that people need in order to live a good life. And this was at the core of his philosophy. He was promoting virtues. He was promoting values that people should get inspired by, and live their life according to them. Um, in the Lacus, for example, and this is the number. This is the philosophical essay that we're going to talk about. The concern, or like I said, Socrates' concern would be the nature of courage. Of course, like I said, Socrates in this dialogue wouldn't be the historical Socrates. He would be the fictional and the invented Socrates. So again, the ideas that we're going to have on the lips and from the mouth of Socrates would be those of Plato. Again, so it would be the nature of courage in the Lacus. In other dialogues by Plato, you would have discussions of piety, friendship, temperance, and justice. Again, what is interesting about the style of Socrates, the fictional Socrates in Plato's work, would be the idea that he does not answer the questions that he raises. So instead of answering them, he keeps asking other people what they think. And when they give him answers, he keeps asking them further questions. So he often picks people who might be expected to know about the issue. So people that he hosts in his conversations, or whom he brings to the conversation, are normally knowledgeable about the subject that he starts. So he often picks people who might be expected to know about the issue. In the Lahos, for example, his question about courage is addressed to two military generals. And once one of them gives an answer, Socrates starts to put the answer to the test by asking a chain of further questions. So again, Socrates would present himself as adding nothing to the discussion because he doesn't commit himself to answers or answering. He doesn't answer, he only asks questions. He simply asks questions without putting forward opinions of his own. So the point of these questions is to investigate whether the person's answer is consistent with other things that he believes or not. So he asks you questions, and when you give an answer, he may recollect that at one point you said something, whether within the conversation itself or from outside. You say at one point you said this or that, and this and that are colliding or are not consistent with what you're saying now. Okay. Again, nothing passes his test. So you give answers, and he starts to kind of refute and challenge the answers. So it's very scathing. It's very tiring for the one that Socrates is asking. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So do you have any questions so far?
No, thank you.
No.
So do you think this
No.
is interesting enough? Is it engaging, or do you find it heavy-handed, or what?
No, it was that previous chapters.
What? What? Come again? Hello?
I don't understand what she said.
Yeah, she'll come back to the mic and identify herself, and then go on with whatever concerns she has. Hello?
Doctor,
Yeah, yes.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Mahmoud, and the next quiz will be Allah from the second. Right?
You're cutting, Mahmoud. You're cutting off. Your voice comes and goes.
Okay, repeat the question.
Yes, please.
Okay. The next quiz will be second book, right?
Yes, with the new change, with the new
Yeah.
update, I think it will be from the second book because we're
Okay.
done with the first book.
Okay. Because there is some of students in the group told me maybe the quiz will be the first book or something like this.
No, with the new update, I think the upcoming quiz is going to be based on the second book.
Okay, thank you so much.
We'll see. I'll update you as soon as I get information from the coordinator, inshallah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Would you like us to start?
But
Yeah,
at
go
the
ahead.
same-
What?
Can I ask?
at the same date, doctor, or update the date?
No, the date is going to be the same.
Okay,
Perhaps
doctor, thank you.
I'd like to ask. I think we have this table where we have the quiz and what the quiz is about, right? This is on. Let me check the. the course. Wait. Yeah, it's okay. So we're done with the first and the
Until
second
now,
quiz.
not update.
Yeah,
Sorry.
until now it's not updated.
Yes.
I mean,
We'll
that's
check about that.
the time is there. It's we're going to do the we're moving towards the fourth quiz or the third quiz. I'm asking you.
Third quiz. No, fourth quiz.
The
Sorry.
the fourth quiz, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
At this chapter. Sure, doctor?
what?
Can I
At this chapter, inshallah,
Well,
fourth quiz.
inshallah, I'll have to check with Miss Fatma and get back to you, inshallah.
Oh, okay, doctor. Thank you.
You're welcome.
sorry,
طيب.
question?
نعم. Go ahead.
Question. I want to ask you about
Let me check. Does she doesn't refer to the style of the questions, right? The last one was what? The last exam was also multiple choice questions, right?
and true and false.
Multiple
Yes.
choices
Yes.
and true and
Yeah.
false.
I don't know about the fourth one. I'll have to ask her and get back to you, inshallah.
No, I'm asking about the final, which is the chapter we will have in the final exam.
I'm not sure I'm getting you. Your voice comes and goes.
She's talking about the final.
What about it?
Which chapter we will take in?
He said what?
She asking
Chapter
about
we will-
The
Go.
chapter
She's asking about what?
The chapter we will take it in a quiz.
I don't know yet because I don't know whether the final will include the chapters that we covered in the quiz. Because if we drop the chapters that we do in the quizzes, we're going to end up with nothing when we go to the final exam, right?
okay, thank you.
I'll ask and get back to you, inshallah.
We need to get to know the answer soon because we do need to refocus on it again.
Okay, I will. What's your name?
Elma.
Salma.
Yes, please.
Yes, it's important.
Yeah, okay.
Doctor,
Yes.
but I heard that the finals are only from the second book, not like from both books, right? Like this is what usually happens. Right?
Not necessarily. It depends on the course. Anyway, like I told you, I'll double check and get back to you, inshallah, perhaps next week or حاجة. We might need an extra class. So would Sunday be convenient?
Sunday, I think it's okay.
Okay, is it okay for
Okay,
everyone?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. So how many of us are from Jeddah?
Me.
Me.
Because we're having we're going to have some kind of meeting. I mean student representatives, or perhaps all the students from Jeddah and me as head of the department here in Jeddah. I'll arrange something and I'll share it on the group for Jeddah people, and I would like you to share it with other Jeddah people in other groups. Can you do that?
Why not?
Okay.
Doctor.
We'll have this meeting perhaps on Monday or something. I'll have to check my calendar and see. And until then, if you have any questions, if your colleagues have questions and concerns, you can always raise them during the meeting, inshallah. Okay?
Doctor,
Yes.
the quiz is not the next week. It's after week, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do your math. I mean, you have, I have the calendar, and you also have the calendar on the
I don't see the
elements.
calendar. Let
Check
me.
the, yes,
Yes, it's not next week. It's the week after.
it's the week after,
Okay.
absolutely, like Saddam is saying.
An extra class.
Okay.
You know,
طيب.
it's in 2.
It's a week 9, and now we are in week 7.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's
yes,
correct.
yes.
Now,
we just had a quiz this week, so next week there is
yeah.
no quiz.
Yeah, that would be too soon. صح. Like Saddam is Saddam, Saddam, I'm sorry. Like Saddam is saying. Okay, so I'll stop here on this note and with this item, and we'll pick this up again during the extra class. Okay. Okay, I'll call it a night, and I wish you all the best. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Alaikum salam. Thank
Walaikum
you.
salam. Thank you.
Bye bye.
وعليكم السلام.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye, Doctor. Thank you.
Bye bye. Alf salam. Why is